Chapter 12. Barthow went to the door, inspected the arrowhead, and then went down. After close examination, he stood. "Yep, that's Comanche." I wandered away to the far end of the yard, leaned my back against a mimosa tree trunk, slid down, and sat on the ground. I know coming last night, I would have died as well. My mind was whipping from shoulda to coulda to why didn't I? I should have known. The smell of their bodies was so heavy now, but everything in the mission was burning, I suppose, which had distracted me. I suggested Arterous go and try to help or protect Father Callias. Is this my fault? Oh, God. I'll have to tell Klement. Now I did vomit. A big breakfast seemed like a good idea, but, not now. I didn't want to sit next to it, so I pushed up and away from the tree. I realized what I'd done was in a small depression that had been dug out around the base of the tree. Whoever did that had broken a fairly substantial root. I know that wasn't good for the tree's health. To get away from the stench of the vomit, I decided to go back to Father Callias's little room, pull a chair out, sit at the top of the stairwell, and wait for Barthow. I didn't want to go back downstairs. Barthow was down there for quite some time, so, feeling useless, I went and tied up the horses, and found a bucket and filled the water trough for them, and found some hay to put on the ground for them as well. When I got back to the chair, he was finally coming up and out. He went into the quarters and got himself a chair, sat down, and put his head in his hands, took off his hat, threw it on the ground. "Son, this is bad. We are going to have to clean this here place up and send word to Father Lorenzo. He will have to decide whether to keep this place open, or if and just leave it abandoned. Y'all told me you'd sent word, and some other priests or workers are on their way here already. I can find 'em and turn 'em around, maybe. They can't witness all this mess here, regardless." He just rubbed his forehead. "Arterous, I can bury him at home, for now, but he can't stay here," I said, staring off into the distance. He only had one magical item on him, a goblin-worked monocle. It's beautifully made, but of no use to ordinary people. It allows magical people to detect traces of magic work. Just so you know, if you come across it. They took everything else, didn't they? "Yeah, there's nothing of value left on him. He had a revolver rifle and a Patterson Colt, didn't he?" "Yeah, we bought them when I arrived here in Texas. A set of each for both of us," I told him. "Well, he was obviously hit with at least 2 arrows. Went down there to try and hold them off, and emptied both. I see lots of blood up here, on and around the door and doorway. He might have killed as many as 3 or 4, and hurt a mess more. They'd have carried off their kilt and hurt, though. No way of knowing for sure. That's a little puddle of dry blood up against the wall, and a bigger one at the bottom of the stairs. I reckon he set up that busted chair in the doorway at the bottom, and tried to keep 'em out as long as he could. I don't know why, in that extreme circumstance, he didn't try some magic least to fix himself up." That was curious. Holed up down there out of sight. He could have at least tried that. "Well, it ain't getting any cooler, son. They will get to swelling and such if I don't get moving on taking care of them right now. You want Arterous to go to your place?" He stood and reset his hat on his head. "Please. I think it's important he is at the home of a friend, not here in the wild of this abandoned, ravaged place." "All right. I'll get the priest up, and then I'll take Arterous to your place. Make sure your mother's going to be okay before I head back." He walked into Father Callias's room, came out with the bedsheets, and went downstairs. A moment later, both came out, floating waist-height, wrapped neatly in the sheets, and came to rest on the ground. It was easy to know which was which, as Arterous was a foot taller. "You'll be all right for a little while, then?" He directed Arterous up and over his shoulder with his wand. Yes, thank you, sir, again for being here when we needed help. I will bury Father Callias next to his brothers over there and try and clean up what I can, I said, still sitting in the chair. Barthow took a look in that direction and made several looping ovals in the air. The grave was then excavated. All righty, son. I'll be back as soon as I can. And he wisped away into a single spot with Arterous and was gone. He was right. The longer I waited, the worse it would be on the priest. I found a handcart and got him in it, then used some rope around the mimosa tree limb to lower him in. I started shoveling the dirt back in, taking several breaks in the heat, and was thankful again for my magical flask. I was not ready to think about telling Klement. It took half an hour in the heat to finish. With the amount of destruction wreaked by the fighters on this place, it wasn't hard to find suitable wood for a cross marker. The best wood I remembered seeing was from the door they had broken to gain access to the basement. When I went to collect good pieces, I picked up the longest, sturdiest piece. Under that, I found the reason he couldn't have healed himself. Arterous' wand was broken, mostly buried in the dirt, a good 6 feet from the entrance to the basement. It must have happened before he went down the stairs. I put the pieces in my inside vest pocket and proceeded to make the marker for Father Callias. When it was finished and set, I went to my saddlebag and got some sourdough and jerky. I was starting to feel hungry and more focused on the work at hand, and I knew the next stop would be downstairs, where I could clean up. The news of what happened here was going to be hard enough. Seeing evidence of it would be a hardship for any new men of God, making them useless to anyone. After finishing my meal and having a few more drinks from my flask, I was ready to head down. First, I went and found their bucket of lye and an old worn horsebrush. I got another bucket half full of water and took them downstairs. I set them down on the floor and had a good look around. Strangely, they didn't seem to care about the books, papers, and scrolls. They were messed up, not destroyed. I guess their anger was satisfied, or they would have burned all this, too. Turning around to where they had been killed, I saw where the blood had pooled, but also the smearing that had happened when they came down and attacked them. Bloody moccasin footprints were all over the front half of the room. With the amount of dust and dirt on the floor, my time would be better spent on the spots that had pooled, but the rest would have to be swept up. At the end of their writing workbench was a broom. I swept the areas that I could clean, then got down on my knees, dipped the brush in the lye water, and started scrubbing. The caustic fumes were unpleasant, but it was coming up. I got the area at the bottom of the stairs done and spun on my knees to face that wampy-jawed wardrobe and started that area. As I reached the end of the spot, I spotted something like a tube under the wardrobe. I grabbed the broom, fished it out from under the cabinet, and brought it to me with the broom handle. It was about 2 feet long, made of hard leather with a strap and cap, resembling a map case. I chucked it over by the door and finished cleaning. I continued up the stairway, scrubbing with lye water, blood off the walls, and some of the flagstone steps where it would work, coming upstairs after about an hour. The air up here was so much nicer. I decided to walk around the whole compound and see what else had been damaged that I could fix, which is pathetic compared to what Barthow can do when he returns. I decided to check for a ladder or something to climb up to the bell tower for a better look. The whole entrance to the back of the chapel was black from the soot of things they tried to burn in there, and I went in. They had burned about half of the pews, the lectern, and some of the decorations. Different paraphernalia were scattered about and broken. More of it might have burned had the rain not drenched everything just prior to their arrival. To my left was a small closet door at the back of the raised pulpit area, so I went back for a closer inspection. It appeared that they had thrown lamp oil on the wooden floor here and lit it on fire, but it was mostly just charred on top, with a few gaps burnt into the spaces between the boards, in all likelihood where the oil had run down between them and dripped through. As I walked on them, which I had never been to before, the hollow sound beneath the floorboards sounded deep. I assumed this was built on a pier and beam floor, which isn't usually more than a foot or two off the ground. This sounded to my ear more like 10 or 12 feet. I went to the little door, and it led to a closet for the roof ladder. It was actually part of the framing of the back wall of the chapel. When I reached the top, I opened the small hatch, made of cedar with a tar waterproofing coating on its entire outer surface, and stepped up onto the small platform. There wasn't more than 2 feet around the sides of the bell, but it was easy to observe out and around. I couldn't detect anyone nearby by sight or sound. Smoke still rose from the damaged wood structures around, but it was only the chapel and the courtyard where the damage was relevant to the attackers. Clearly, they only wanted the people dead. They could have stayed, taken this as a little fort even, but often when their anger boils over, it is taken out against people. After all, it is the invading people who are changing their world, not the stones and wood. It all felt so sad that all people do this. It is worth noting that even before we arrived, or the Spanish, or now the Mexicans and Texians, the Comanche fought every other tribe, including the Apache. They killed and took land and slaves from each other. I'm sure there are tribes that no longer exist because of the evils men force on others. For whatever reason. That cycle cannot be what God intended for us. For any of us. The worst, at least in European history, is when violence is justified because of what they perceive God, or a God, wants. In the end, it is always the ambition and thirst for power of one group over another, and God plays no part in that conceit. Free will is either totally free to decide what to do and how to justify it, or it is limited and manipulated by the Almighty. I see no evidence that anything other than the same impulse that led to expulsion from the garden is to blame for any atrocity. Survey complete, I climbed back down the ladder. I decided to pry up one of the damaged boards of the burned area on the floor of the chapel and have a look. They were so badly ruined, they would all have to come up anyway, if they wanted to rebuild. I found an old rock bar at the back of the small horse stable area and took it back to the chapel to figure out what was beneath it. It took quite a bit of wrenching back and forth to pry those old square nails loose, but the board was maybe 2 inches thick by 10 inches wide, and a 4-foot section broke loose. Enough room to lower a lantern and look. I found one that wasn't broken back in the basement where I was before, and it turned out to be the only unbroken one. I picked up the map case and laid it on the table before I went back upstairs. Striking a match and getting it on the wick under the glass, it lit up fine. Trimming it down, I lay on my belly and lowered it down. It was deep. It was a mortared stone room, maybe 12 feet square. There was nothing visible, no furniture, and no crates. It was pretty empty. It did look like a door, maybe in the corner, towards the room where Arterous and Father Callias had died. I brought the lamp back up and set it down. I stood up, dusted myself off, picked up the lamp, and blew it out. "Raileanu, you around?" It was Barthow. I was glad and went out to see him. "I got the blood downstairs cleaned up. Father Callios is buried, too." "Good. Your mother said she suspected something bad happened when he didn't return last night. She is all right. She's telling the professor now and will tell Mr. Metternich when he arrives in Vienna. They're traveling there now and should arrive in a couple days. Your Monika's with them. She had another unsettling encounter with that Runetta woman. Is it all right if I try to find that other mission sent some people en route here and talk with them? I shouldn't be more than an hour or two." Barthow was clearly in a hurry to get all of this in a better place. If he had other pressing business, he might not tell me. "Sure, yes. Thanks for taking him to Mama and checking on her for me. It is greatly appreciated by everyone," I said, comforting him to go. "All right, son. I'm sorry about all this. I'll be quick as I can." And with that, he was gone again. I went over to the front gate to figure out if it was remotely salvageable. It wasn't. I took apart some of the sides of the small sheds along the wall and created a makeshift fence that allowed me to close the front of the compound if needed. I went ahead and closed it up, after considering I was alone for an indeterminate amount of time, and even if someone wanted to come to the church, there was really nothing they could want to see here now. I spent the next few hours cleaning up what I could and trying to put the chapel into a presentable state. Barthow came walking into the sanctuary about 3 in the afternoon, sat in a pew at the back, took his hat off, and took a drink from his little flask. I went over to him and handed him the flask I got from Klement. "Try this."
"What you got there, son?" he asked. "Looks purty fancy."
"As much as you want," I said, smiling. He lifted it to his nose, sniffed it, gave a and tilted it back. After a few long seconds, he stopped and let out a satisfied breath.
"Oh, that is incredible. So good. Oh, that's good."
And he went back to another big drink.
"I get it. Where's the water from?"
He paused only long enough to say, "From a silver basin behind a waterfall in Switzerland. Good, huh?"
"That may be the best flask I have ever seen in my life, son."
Barthow handed it back to me, quite satisfied. "It was given to me by Arterous' uncle, right before I came home," I said, putting it away in my vest. "I also figured out why he couldn't survive the attack here." I pulled the broken wand out of my pocket and showed it to him. He looked at it for a second, then up at me.
"I'm sorry, son. He seemed like a really good feller. Tell his uncle I'm sorry this is such a harsh place."
Looking back at his boots.
"You neither should feel guilt, son. I know you'd have died as well. None of us know God's plan, and don't ever let anyone convince you of guilt, if you're sure you've done everything best you coulda, with the situation and knowing you had the time of troubles. Besides, I know what Arterous would know, too. You, your ma, Father Callius, y'all good folks, and for a soldier, standing between danger and those you care for is all that matters. The big J.C. said it, too. No greater love is there than to give your life for your friends." "Well, break is over. I found 'em on the trail, after speaking with Father Lorenzo to start with. They're only a couple hours out, plan on showing up here tonight. Father Lorenzo got all the details, thought for a moment, and said to go on and clean it up. He'd told them that Father Callius was very ill before they left. They were going to be ready for him to have passed, so we'll spiff the place up for him. I told them we'd come across him already passed away and buried him. They don't need to know all this grisly business, as I also looked in briefly on the Comanches who were involved here. They had lost all but one baby girl and one squaw. I saw only 4 braves, and they've already gone approximately 40 miles due west. They ain't coming back here." He slapped his knees as he stood up and walked out the front door of the chapel. Once out front, he crossed his arms and looked around. He tipped his hat back on his head, wiped his forehead with his sleeve, and raised his wand. I could hear the sound of lumber flipping, hissing, smoke, and dust puffing out the side windows. He walked around the right side, which had only about 12 feet clearance to the wall, and even new windows popped into place from inside. He then went around to the left side and did those windows as well. He paused, took a few steps back, looked up, shielded his eyes, and squinted. Then he pointed his wand at the bell and replaced the pull rope from its arm, which I had failed to notice when I was up there. He pointed to the back door which we'd used earlier, and it got a brand new door. He went to the quarters around back, put new bedding and sheets on the Padre's bed, then went around to the bunkhouse, which he hadn't been into. The windows, again, these hinged to open in, fell into place, and provided them with new bedding as well.
Barthow continued around the perimeter, repairing, cleaning, and replacing necessities as he came to them. I decided to head down to the scriptorium and get the map case off the tabletop that I had left. I wanted to examine what was in it. It didn't look like anything down in the dark, so I went upstairs in the afternoon light. There was a piece of leather stuck down at the bottom, so I pulled that out. And then I thought I saw something else. Angling it so the sunlight went all the way down, there was only a single sheet of paper rolled at the bottom. I reached in and slung the case on my shoulder and unrolled the page. The time with Klement's mother, while a lovely experience being with a tight-knit and loving family, was extended by a whole day after Monika and the troop were back on the road. Truthfully, she welcomed the extra day off riding in the carriage, as it is so much more difficult on one's body than dislocating. They would be in Laxenburg tonight, and the hotel was already preparing for their arrival. Klement would give a small speech at the town hall tonight, followed by a reception to which Monika would attend. However, his wife and children would retire to the hotel for dinner. The meeting was intended to discuss increased seed stock for local farmers and the government's plan to build a grain mill on the river, which would operate at no cost to the farmers, except for a 10% claim on the milled product. Monika was looking forward to the midday halt, as it would be near a location known for truffles. Raileanu had shown her something the time before their last visit that may help find them using magic. He had discovered it while someone was using a spell to show where a plant was healthy, glowing red, and not healthy, glowing blue. He noticed, while this was happening, that he could use his keen hearing to verify the movement of white threads of mushrooms through the soil, thanks to their speed. He perceived the ones he was observing were glowing green. She was keen to try it. Nothing else of note occurred on the pleasant ride to that spot. The slope of the ground away from the roadway led downward into a huge stand of old oaks on the left side of the roadway. Some of them were 4 and 5 feet in diameter, their canopies stretching 60 or 70 feet high, overlapping each other, entangling their branches to be one huge interlocked wall, impervious to any normal storm. Their limbs' breadth was conceivably 100 feet around. Monika couldn't see a single blade of grass or shrub inside the drip line of those woods. The perfect place for a long-standing mat of truffle growth. Stepping out of the carriage, she stretched in a most unladylike fashion, not caring how it looked. She tugged at the bottom of her hip-length jacket, grabbed a woven willow basket from the supply carriage, and marched off into the woods to see what she could find. She spent about an hour walking half a mile into the woods, enjoying their shade and the beauty of these massive, wise, living things as her soothing companions. She knelt here and there, using the spell on the mat of the forest floor, and by now she had half a dozen fragrant marbled truffles, maybe the size of peaches. The system worked well. She decided that was enough and sat down on a huge fallen trunk for a few minutes. She set the basket down and knelt facing the trunk to test a spell on the place where the forest floor met the trunk, to see what kind of mushrooms might be growing in that area or in the trunk of the fallen tree. Delicious, that voice said from the other side of the log. Monika stood straight up and pointed her wand all in one motion, aiming it at the location of the sound as she stood. It was Runetta, lazily leaned against the opposite side of the log with her back to Monika. She was biting small pieces off of a truffle. She leaned her head back and to the left, not really trying to look at Monika. "Do you mind? I do love a good mushroom, dear." "Explain what you want right now, or I will incapacitate you and have you arrested for stalking and threatening me. Don't forget who I travel with, either, dearie." Monika mocked her civility. "Tisk, tisk, tisk," Runetta taunted her, letting her wand slip into view across her left shoulder, clearly indicating her preparedness. "I have posed no threat to you, dear, merely curiosity. Anyone can see that. Only one of us has drawn down on the other. She turned around slinkily, facing Monika with a broad smile. She then dislocated without motion or blinking, letting the half-eaten truffle fall into the basket. Monika did not waste a second. She snatched the basket and dislocated herself right to the carriages, basket in hand. It was a risk, but hopefully worth it. Perhaps the sheer number of travelers in their group would allow such an act to be unclear to any observer. She arrived on the far side of the carriages from the road and immediately looked around for Klement, who was at the front of the row of carts of cargo. "Klement," she said quietly but seriously. He excused himself from the conversation he was involved in and walked calmly over to her.
"Yes, Monika, what is it?"
He approached, smiling. She lifted the basket, picked up the eaten truffle, and showed it to him. "Runetta appeared to me more than half a mile deep, alone in the woods. She ate this, taunted me, and dislocated. Just now I also dislocated here, so I could tell you straight away." Klement looked displeased by this, looked front and back of the line, spotted one of his soldiers, and whistled at him, swinging his arm for that person to come to him, who swiftly ran to him.
"Sir, how can I help?"
the guard said.
"This is Wenzel Prog. He is your personal bodyguard now. Wenzel, you are not allowed to let this woman out of your sight, save for private matters she must attend to. Her safety, honor, and protection are your sworn responsibility now. Do you understand?"
Klement was dead serious, and this man knew it.
"This is Monika Binder. She is one of my very best friends in the world. Make no mistakes."
"Nice to meet you. I am sorry for the circumstances, however," Monika said.
"He is one of the best discreet guards in Austria, and one of the few who are also of magical heritage. He will be able to serve in that capacity, where none of these other guards are of that ability. Until Raileanu returns, he will protect you. And one more thing. No more unescorted jaunts into the wilderness, please."
Then Klement smiled and went back to the conversation he had left before. "Fear not, madam. I will ride on the top of the carriage and never be further than a room away. I will always be able to see you, no matter what. Quite seriously, make no changes to your behavior. I will be nearby, but never close." He went to the carriage he had been on, retrieved his bag, and put it in Monika's carriage, and stayed there. Klement walked back over to her and made sure no one was in earshot and whispered to Monika.
"The next time you encounter Runetta, you should immediately bind her, and we will sort out what is happening with no more delay. She has chosen only to visit when you're alone, so it should be safe to plan on that action."
He touched her on the shoulder lightly and was about to walk past her when he stopped and looked at a carriage approaching to pass them on the road. They both looked at it to see who it might be. Monika grabbed Klement's arm. It was Runetta. She was calmly smiling and waving from the window. "That's her," Monika said sharply, pointing at her. "That is her, right there."
"I know that carriage. This mystery may be solved as soon as we arrive in Vienna. I don't feel you will see her again before then,"
Klement said calmly. "What do you mean?"
"That is the carriage of the Glauer family. Occultists. If what Raileanu and his family are dealing with is some kind of forbidden magical knowledge, they will be interested in it, no doubt. They, and some other ancient family lines, secretly seek the power of demons, or more accurately, the fallen angels from the beginning of human time."
Klement stopped, scoffed, and shook his head.
"Mostly what they obsess over is sad, old, dark magic that causes more harm than good, but they collect harmful knowledge, artifacts, and spells. If they are sniffing around, they suspect it is more than an illness, and what we know so far is that it was not some unknown mortal illness. We may be able to gather enough evidence to convince them it is nothing of interest to them, and she may just stop looking."
Klement looked hopeful now. Maybe. The remainder of the trip was uneventful, and that woman, Runetta, didn't appear again. After an hour's rest at the last hotel of the trip, Monika left with Klement to the other side of the town and into the church building for the meeting. There were already 50 or 60 townsfolk inside, including the burgomaster and his chief of police. Upon seeing Klement enter, they both walked briskly to the entrance where Klement was shaking hands, and interrupted the greetings. Monika overheard them speaking, as she had already sat down, and they stopped abruptly and looked at her. They were portly men, with wide, waxed mustaches and great round cheeks. Both dressed for the occasion, the burgomaster in his best suit, hair combed over with some kind of oil to hide his large balding spot on top of his head. The police chief, in his uniform, with a cross-chest patent leather harness for his pistol belt and a dark blue jacket and pants, along with new shoes. Briefly, it struck her as comical, the first moment of levity of the day, but neither looked to have put those clothes on in some time, perhaps 50 pounds worth of time. The police chief hustled everyone away from their little conclave, then pointed at Monika.
"Do you know this woman?"
The police chief tried to say with force, but whispering, and Monika could see he was profusely sweating now as he asked in earnest.
"Yes, she is my assistant,"
Klement came up with quickly.
"Can she be trusted to be discreet?"
The mayor then asked, looking at her, wiping his own head with a handkerchief to control sweat.
"Sir, would she be my assistant if she was not capable of discretion?"
he responded, staring him down sternly. The burgomaster glanced back at her and then shook his head as if to say, "Oh, of course. Yes, yes."
"Now, what is it that has you two behaving like this?"
Klement demanded, feeling his already long day stretching further out. The police chief pulled a small rag out of his pocket, unfolded it, and showed it to Klement. It was a black and oozy potato. Once Klement had seen it, he wrapped it back up and put it back in his pocket.
"The whole store of potatoes that was stored in the warehouse barn you passed as you came into town was found this morning. Then late this afternoon, a porter was storing some sacks of barley in it, and found them all like this. People are already saying witchcraft. Something must be done, counsel."
The burgomaster was dead serious, and the chief was nodding as fast as he could, his cheeks flopping around like fish hung on the side of his head.
"Of course. May I ask you to go to the barn with some workers, take those potatoes out to a safe place, and burn them? They have a black slime mold. I have seen it before this very week in another town."
Klement cleverly refused to give a name, so questions and rumors would have no path to follow.
"Since encountering this earlier, I have already ordered Imperial stores to be sent to replace those affected by this blight. Just let me know how many crates, and I will have them here before the first snows. You have my word."
Klement grabbed the burgomaster's shoulder tightly and gave it a little shake, then held out his right hand for a firm handshake to seal the arrangement, which was reciprocated.
"Now, let us speak to the people about their new grain mill."
Both men were reassured and walked to the stage of the church, where chairs had been set up, talking and nodding to each other as they congratulated one another on how they had handled it. "Runetta, do you think?" Monika asked, leaning toward Klement, who was still in the center aisle.
"Yes, presumably just for fun as she passed by,"
he said, shaking his head in disbelief at her disregard for their kind in every possible way.